I recently reached out to Nick Heitzman and asked if he would be interested in doing an interview about his time working as the art director for EQOA. He was kind enough to say yes. This is the email interview that Nick was able to complete for this great community. I would personally like to thank Nick on behalf of the EQOA community for taking time out of his busy schedule and answering these questions for us. I am using Amazon AWS text-to-speech for this project as to make all the voices of Nick, the interviewer and the narrator different and the video uniform in style. I really hope you enjoy it. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and don't forget to check out Project Returnhome's website for all your EQOA community and revival information and news. Without further delay, let's begin the interview. Stay tuned after the interview for a blast from the past. A 2003 video interview for PlayStation Magazine with Nick about EQOA. This Q&A section is about development and design process.
What was the original vision for EQOA, and how did it evolve over the course of development?
Originally, the mandate was simple: get the core content present in the PC EverQuest game playable on the PlayStation using the PlayStation Network adapter. The primary driving factor in development changes was that we were not able to use the upcoming PlayStation hard drive peripheral, which meant the whole open-world game with 6 races, male and female, 15 classes, and dozens of interconnected zones had to stream within the 32 megabyte memory limit on default hardware.
What were the biggest technical or artistic challenges your team faced in developing an MMO for the PlayStation 2?
With the 32 megabyte streaming limit came all the art challenges. Out of the 32 megabytes we had, over 10 megabytes had to permanently allocate to just the international font used in the game. AI for the mobs and NPCs was the next largest chunk of PS2 memory, and eventually we had just a fraction of what our PC counterpart had reserved for textures, meshes, world chunks, UI, etc. This resulted in an almost constant devolution of art quality as more systems and content were added that also required a piece of streaming memory. The mere fact that we actually did get it all working and playable in the short development cycle was pure black magic by the whole team, particularly the programmer John Buckley and network guru Vince Herron. Those folks pulled off coding miracles for that point in time.
How did your team balance the art direction, staying true to EverQuest on PC, while creating something fresh for console players?
Our art team was very small throughout development. For the first year, it was just me prototyping the world, characters, UI, etc., to find the limits of what we could reasonably do given the extreme memory limitations. We eventually grew to me, Kevin Burns, who worked heavily on the original EverQuest, and Steph Young, to build the entire world, structures, props. Kay Manjua, Bob Kathman, Bill Yeats, and Thad Clevenger on all the character art, and finally Sabrina Fox, also from the original EQ, on VFX. There was also a team from the original EQ to help build out our user interface. The thing about all of us was that we were always playing EverQuest, and as soon as the first zone in EQOA was built, we were all playing that as well, and Dungeons & Dragons campaigns with the entire EQOA team. The combination of veteran EQ developers and always playing EQ and EQOA meant we were always striving to recreate that unique EQ experience in the console version. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not.
Were there any features, zones, or mechanics that were planned but ultimately didn't make it into the final release?
Yes, of course. Besides the sacrifice of visual quality across the board, we had enough cut content for 3 expansions. We were only able to build out one of them, however, and that became EQOA Frontiers, which introduced new zones and gameplay, but retained the same basic content, along with the Ogre race and the Alchemist class, which we had to originally cut.
How did you approach creating such a large, seamless world with the PS2's hardware limitations?
Holy cow, this alone could be a book. All the experimentation with the world chunk system so we could stream parts of the world, and we could have multiple folks working on different areas of the map that could then be all brought together in Perforce and function seamlessly. The collision methodology we finally solved, having a controller to play with, was another challenge. We had a long list of challenges, the core team consisting of me, John Buckley, Vince Herron, Ben Bell, and Rod Humble, spent that first year solving one after another until we had this huge house of cards streaming in roughly 22 megabytes of memory over old network technology. It was so much fun. There was no installing the game either. It all played right off the CD.
This Q&A section is about art direction and team leadership.
What was your leadership style when managing a team of 20-plus artists and animators?
At full production size, the only way to make it work was to divide environmental art, character art, /animation, and UI, VFX, etc. into 3 distinct groups. Cayenne Manjua led the character art team and did an amazing job despite the limits. We were never completely happy with any of the visuals, but with the memory cap we either had to work with the degraded visuals everywhere or cancel the game. We were not going to cancel the game. It was too much fun to play an MMO on your couch with a controller. The 3 sections had their own limited autonomy, and we met multiple times a week to go over everyone's progress, any blocking issues, and what was next on our list to get in the game.
Which areas or visual elements of EQOA are you most proud of personally?
Some of the environmental vistas came out well. I like those. The characters were just plain ugly. However, just the fact that we got all the races, classes, and dozens of monsters, etc. in the game, animating with AI streamed in a few megabytes, more than makes up for the visual deficiencies. I think just the fact that we got the product completed was a miracle, especially as we were a forgotten relic amidst EQ2, PlanetSide, and Star Wars Galaxy's development, all of which looked and played so much more impressively than our little niche game.
Did your team use specific tools or proprietary software for creating the game's art assets?
Oh wow, what did we use? Photoshop for textures and 2D art, Maya for animations, 3DS, Max for environment and props, Perforce for content control, and everything else including the engine was built from scratch for the project.
Were there particular design inspirations that influenced the look of Tunaria?
The goal was to maintain the look and feel of the original EQ if possible. The lighting, bloom, and fog were used extensively to simulate day and night states, and the fog helped the streaming world chunks, which had to pop in way too closely, that it gave the overall game this foggy everywhere look that was not too bad. Fair trade-off for not seeing all the game content popping in within view as you moved around the world.
When building the world of EQOA, how much came from existing EverQuest lore versus original content created by your team?
We tried to use EQ lore where possible. The original EQ lore team worked to give us detailed information on Tunaria 500 years before EQ, and we went with it. The game has a surprising amount of history and lore, even in the readable books and props.
This Q&A section is about EQOA Frontiers and unreleased content.
What was the goal behind EQOA Frontiers, and how did it build on the base game?
We had the Ogre and Alchemist on the original list of races and classes, but did not have time to do them. The Ogre class was hard because it was physically so much larger than the other characters. Our doorways and other areas sized to fit barbarians as a maximum were suddenly blocking ogres from a lot of gameplay. If I remember correctly, it was John Buckley again who created a system that reduced or removed the ogre collision in specific instances so they could enter places already on the map. We had enough content for 3 expansions. After Frontiers was released, I believe we delivered some of the remaining content via free updates. I'm not exactly sure how much made it into the final iteration of EQOA though.
Were there any future expansions or major updates that were in the works before the game was sunset?
Yes, we had 2 more expansions planned, but the game was abruptly content-locked, and we all moved on to other Sony online projects.
Was there ever serious talk of transitioning EQOA to PC or another console?
No, it was a special creature in that it played on a vanilla PS2. Visually, it was in the same class as the original EQ, which was also being slowly abandoned in favor of EQ2 and all the other SOE games coming out.
This Q&A section is about community and legacy.
How aware were you and the team of the community forming around EQOA during its run and after its closure?
Somewhat. We still played the game for months post-release and existed harmoniously with regular players who never knew we were the dev team. We didn't get any special perks or treatment, so we could experience the same highs and lows as the players and recommend fixes and upgrades where possible in the time between initial release and Frontier's completion.
What are your thoughts on the game's ongoing cult following and preservation efforts by fans?
I think it is super cool. There was nothing quite like being able to play it all together for the first time, and I believe it is still a testament to our team's engineering and networking skills that it did the impossible and actually worked without a hard drive or better internet connection.
In your opinion, what made EQOA unique and memorable compared to other MMOs?
When EQOA was released, there were only 2 MMOs playable on a console. Us and Final Fantasy XI, which streamed off the hard drive and looked so much better. At the time, just the possibility of playing a game with people from all over the world while sitting on your couch was so new. The controller was nice too. I think, even today, only a handful of MMOs were able to make the transition to console, and they had better tech, more freedom in memory, install size, etc.
Do you support the efforts of the teams working to restore EQOA as a non-commercial, community-driven project?
Yes, that sounds very cool.
This Q&A section is about behind the scenes.
Can you share a memorable or funny moment from the EQOA development days?
I can't animate characters to save my life. So, the first creature in the game was a too-high poly beholder that was mostly static. It was the initial stand-in for all mobs when the combat system was first being developed. Also, our team was so tight-knit. We all worked together ceaselessly, played D&D together, explored San Diego and Comic-Con together before it was so huge. So much fun in those days. John Buckley went on to program for Blizzard and was key to getting Diablo 3 and now 4 onto consoles with full controller support.
How did SOE internally view EQOA compared to other EverQuest titles?
Like a cool novelty at first, then as a failure when compared to EQ2 and the other games that came along after.
Was there ever a discussion about crossplay or crossover content with PC EverQuest or the EverQuest tabletop RPG?
No, not at all.
What was the most personally exciting part of working on EQOA?
The team were all absolute rock stars. To see where they went post-EQOA is mind-blowing. Being part of that group during the months of development was pure magic.
This Q&A section is about preservation and documentation.
Do you still have any concept art, design documents, or early builds that might be shareable for preservation?
I have the original EQOA Frontier CD, the huge EQOA and Frontier strategy guides, and a smattering of printed and digital screenshots. Any original art or assets I had were either left at Sony or were on hard drives/disks that have long since vanished. I might have one left. I should check in my old workbox.
Are you familiar with the current revival efforts like eqoaemu, Sandstorm, or community hubs like projectreturnhome and the subreddit?
No, not at all.
How does it feel knowing that your work helped shape people's lives and still provides a sense of community and nostalgia today?
I love it. So many other developers' work have affected my life over the years. I can only hope my efforts might do the same.
What advice would you give fans trying to preserve the history and spirit of EQOA?
Good luck with it. I think the idea is cool, but it has been so many years. Technologically, EQOA is a fossil that is worth preserving.
And then there's the time saved by playing in one colossal zoneless world.
We came up with like 8 different, completely different looking types of areas for the game. Then we had to mesh them all together because they all have to transition into one another, down to the bottom of the deepest dungeon, to the top of the highest, volcano or mountain. You will never experience any kind of a load, a pause, or anything that will interrupt your gameplay. So once you get in the game, you're there. It's basically a social interaction. exploration and excitement of these games is outpaced by the friends that you make.